Here's a mystery for you. Did you know that churches in this country struggle to attract men? You're probably aware of that. It's been an ongoing challenge for decades. Currently, only about 1 in 5 men in this country attend religious services on a weekly basis. Only 1 in 5. And in the average church service, if you sit in the back pew, you'll be able to count 50% more women than men. In the average one. In some churches, maybe in yours, the gap is much wider. Now, have you seen what I'm talking about? It is a long-standing issue. But here's the mystery. In other churches, there's no gender gap at all. These churches are overflowing with men, and not just in the pews, but serving in the youth ministry, and serving in missions, in the music ministry, and guest services, and even in the nursery. And you look around on a typical Sunday morning in these churches, and there are equal numbers of men and women. Well, why is that? What are these churches doing to attract men? To influence men to show up and to engage in church life in a society where fewer and fewer men attend church? Well, I've been researching this for a while now, visiting churches and interviewing pastors all over this country, including here in North Carolina. And what I'm finding is that churches that attract men do so by using this principle of customization to do it. They know their audience, and they've designed their environment and their entire church experience to be attractive to that audience. In this case, to be attractive to men. So are you interested in what that looks like and how they actually do this? Would you tell me if you weren't? You're probably too polite for that. But let me just tell you a little bit about how they're doing it. When I visited a place called Christ Church of the Valley, this is in Phoenix, before I ever walked into the church, and this was for a Saturday night service, before I ever walked in there, I smelled hot dogs being grilled by the hundreds. I walk into this church, there's this enormous cafe, and they're not just serving food that guys might like, hot dogs and other such things, but they have television screens everywhere, each one tuned to a different sports contest. Right? It looks a little bit like a sports bar. Minus the beer, mind you, but the place is unique. In fact, I was told that some guys just hang out in that cafe Saturday after Saturday, munching on hot dogs and watching ESPN, and they never even make it into the service. All right? They do this for months. And that's just fine with this church, because eventually they do take their first tentative steps into that auditorium, and at that point, they are hooked. A pastor that I talked with in Alabama also uses television as a drug. They put TV screens in the men's bathroom. Over every urinal, there's a TV screen. As well as over the mirror in the bathroom. All of them tuned to some sports network. They're just trying to create what they call a man-friendly environment. It goes far beyond TVs, though. Some of these churches have other kinds of decor that say, this is a place for men. Some of the churches are actually constructed to look like a lodge, like a hunting lodge or a camping lodge. The materials are all wood and rock and exposed beams. It looks like the kind of place that you'd walk into at a campground. I've seen a church in Texas like this. I've seen a church in Wisconsin like this. The architecture communicates to people, church isn't stuffy, church isn't old, this isn't a stodgy place. This is going to be an adventure. You're really going to like it. Without the pastor even saying a word. Also, almost all the churches that I've studied have eliminated flowers. Now, this might be a little bit of a touchy subject, I don't know, but they've eliminated flowers from the interior. They're gone from the lobby, gone from the altar, gone from the sanctuary altogether. They've also intentionally chosen colors that are attractive to men. Deeper, darker colors on the walls, on the website, on the app, on their phone. Definitely no pastels. No pastels, no flowers. One pastor put it to me this way. He said that the lobbies of some churches look like your daughter's bedroom. That's not going to be us. The pastor in Phoenix replaced all the flowers in their lobby with 3 motorcycles. You walk into 3 Harley Davidsons that they have in there. Just as decorations. They don't ride them or anything like that. But he told me that it communicated to men that this is a normal place. This is not your daughter's bedroom, basically. It sounds like a gimmick, I know. It sounds a little gimmicky, but all the churches are doing is customizing their environment to help men feel a little bit more comfortable there. They're creating a space that says, yes, men belong here, rather than, no, church is for women and for children. Another way that they're attracting men is by shortening the services and by shortening the sermons. This might be a touchy subject as well, but this is research. Don't shoot the messenger. Sunday services in most of these churches are no longer than 60 minutes. The sermons are no more than 25 to 30 minutes, typically. And it's not that men have shorter attention spans necessarily, but most of them just want the pastor to get to the point. And so that's what these pastors do. Again, nothing personal. I've never been to any of your churches. I'm not speaking to anyone individually in here. I'm simply communicating some empirical results from this study. And these sermons, they tend to be highly practical. They tend to focus on issues of work and family and finding your purpose and grace and forgiveness and overcoming your regret and stepping up and going out and changing the world. The pastors I talk to say that when they create these messages, when they pick their topics, when they pick their illustrations or metaphors, typically they have men in mind. In one church I visited, the message included several Super Bowl commercials. That was his approach that day. And after each one, the pastor talked about the worldview and subtle messages inherent in these commercials. Isn't that ingenious? He's teaching worldview through Super Bowl commercials. And everybody in the congregation loved it. I mean, it's especially connected with the men, though. The music in these services tends to be very sensitive to male ears as well. Not only do they tend to be more guitar-driven than keyboard-driven, but they avoid what some of these pastors call Jesus is my boyfriend type songs. You know what I'm talking about? These sort of love affair with Jesus lyrics. You won't hear in these churches songs like I'm desperate for you, or Jesus, lover of my soul, or let my words be few. Jesus, I am so in love with you. That's just weird to a lot of guys. That kind of stuff, and they don't want to sing it. Instead, you're more likely to hear songs like How Great Is Our God, and Break Every Chain, and lyrics like You Split the Sea so I could walk right through it, and other songs about the strength and the power and the majesty and the greatness of God. One church in Tucson, Arizona, they lower the key of all their songs. They lower the key just so the guys can hit the notes, right? And it sounds like a little thing, but this pastor was adamant when talking to me. He said, if guys can't hit the notes, they generally don't sing the songs. And if they don't sing the songs, then the worship experience is compromised. So we lower the key. As simple as that. Notice what's going on here. The environment of these churches is customized to be attractive to men. The message is customized. The music is customized. And then there's one last thing I should mention. Maybe the most important thing that I've noticed about these churches and how they get men to show up and to keep showing up. When they staff the church with pastors and other leaders, they hire people who pass what they call the beer test. These people passed, it was the worship leader, the pastor, people standing at the door. They passed the beer test. One pastor in Charlotte told me about it. He said, if after hearing me, a guy feels like he'd like to have a beer with me, then I know I've connected with him. Yeah, I want to hear more from you, pastor. I'd like to sit down and have a drink with you. And it's not that he goes out and has a beer with these congregants, but that's the type of person that they want on their staff. They tend to hire people who are athletic, people who have maybe a little bit of a rough past, and can connect on that level. People who talk like guys talk, within reason at least. People who like what guys like and understand the pressures of being a man and are empathetic to that and maybe a little bit encouraging. And by the way, the pastor in these churches doesn't have to be a man. I interviewed a female pastor near Chicago who clearly passes this beer test. She loves football, she's a workout fanatic, talks about that all the time, she has a business degree and she understands that world, and overall she just connects well with men. And as a result, her church is 57% men in a denomination that is 57% women. Now, there's something going on there that we can learn from. It's a very basic use of this influence principle of knowing your audience and communicating in ways that will keep them listening. Now, Last thing. Some people ask, legitimately, I think, well, does that mean these churches are just for men? If they're being designed around attracting men, what about the women? What about the children? What's going on here? Well, I think the attendance numbers in these churches and the growth of these churches speaks to that question and speaks for itself. The church in Alabama that I mentioned started 8 years ago. Currently, they have almost 2,000 people a week showing up at that church. The church in Charlotte that I mentioned, it's Mecklenburg. You can go down and visit it sometime. They started 25 years ago. Currently, across all their campuses, they have 10,000 people a week showing up. And the church out in Phoenix, that launched 35 years ago. Currently, they have 27,000 people attending that church every week across all of their sites. It's one of the 10 largest churches in America. These are some remarkably influential churches, and each one started with only a handful of people. But now they're reaching thousands of men and women and children because they're built on one simple premise. If you get the man, you get the family. Typically, if you get the man, you get everybody in his sphere of influence. And that's been their strategy, and so they've customized around appealing to men. And also, pastor after pastor in these churches tell me that women love these churches. And this is a self-report, so see it through that lens. But they say that women love these churches. They repeatedly tell me, thank you, thank you, thank you, pastor. This is the only church my husband will ever go to, or that my father will ever go to, or that my brothers will ever go to. This is the only church that my sons will get up on Sunday morning and attend. And it's transforming our family. Thank you. And they often say it with tears of joy in their eyes. This is the kind of thing that happens when we take seriously God's call to be an influencer, to steward well what God has entrusted to us. 5 talents become 10, and 10 talents become 100, and maybe 1,000, and maybe 10,000, and ultimately maybe 27,000. God's kingdom grows, and lives are forever changed when we co-labor with God to persuade the world, or maybe just our small corner of the world. Thank you.